and it made me think that I was stupid, right? And
Yeah.
I wasn't good enough for the grades, right? But
Yeah.
when I grew up and I took actually that this web development education, what
Yeah.
it helped me also, it also grew my confidence. So what I have is a disease called an autoimmune disease called Cogan syndrome, and before I did not know what autoimmune was, and it's basically your own immune system attacking your own body. When I woke up, also like suddenly I couldn't hear in my right ear. And also my eyes was hurting me, and I also remember when I was watching the final of the World Cup final.
Yeah.
Even like I wear sunglasses just to be able to watch the final, right? Because it's
Wow.
my creative process. Like it's a mix between chaos and structure, right? So
Until someone smarter than myself made me realize there is nothing bigger than myself.
But if you don't believe, nobody else is going to believe.
To get something you never had, you have to do something you never did.
Yes, yes, yes. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another fantastic episode from your boys at the Paper Trails podcast. It's your boy Sharmarke, aka Sharksy Bolaroid, and today my co-host is back, Mo himself.
Yes,
What
yes,
do you say?
sir.
Well, how are you?
I can't complain, man. I'm good. I'm good. Just out here, man. Finally made it back.
Finally made it
Finally,
back, man. It's
I
good to
finally
see
broke
you.
out. Yeah,
That right.
I
Right.
was locked up,
And
man.
today we'll come back to your locked up. But today we're with a special guest who not only is he special because of the stuff that he does, but also because he shares my name, which is a very
Ooh.
rare thing to have. Goes by the name Sharmarke Hujale. How are you, brother?
I'm doing good, Alhamdulillah. What about you? Thank you for having me, guys.
No, of course, of course. I
Pleasure's
wanted to have you on
ours.
for an absolute while, you know. I've been seeing the stuff that
Yeah, Shamaki makes it. He's been saying like every time he comes across someone that's got the same name as him, he's got to get them on the podcast. And he's
that
giving you
right.
all names. He's giving you all numbers like prisoner numbers.
Yeah, you know
I
what
don't
it
know which
is
one's number
we
one and
gotta
number
just
two.
build the community. That's what it is. We gotta
Shamaki
build the
community.
community. We
Yeah, we
gotta
should do
make
that.
sure that we look out for each other. You know, that's what matters. There's not many of us left.
True. Like I always used to call us like a rare species,
That right. It
because
is
that
a rare
yeah.
species
Yeah,
because we
for
can't name our children
Shamaki.
Sharmarke after ourselves. So it's like
I
No,
know,
no,
man.
no,
I
no.
know, man.
the name just has to
There's
keep on moving.
listen, man.
Hopefully, someone else picks it up. You know?
There's a lot of Mohammeds. Yeah,
Oh
come
yeah,
on, man. Make
Yeah.
the first Shamaki.
like it's all over
Nah.
the place.
Oh, why not, fella? Yeah, man. But we're back. We're back. Paper Trails. I don't know what episode. This is now because I joined a bit late. You recorded a few without me, haven't you?
Yeah.
And
Of
I got
course, of course.
Shamaki squared with me.
Of course. So what we want to talk about is this podcast being by creatives for creatives, the people that we get on, the guests that we have on. We want to also touch into their creative aspects and what kind of got them into it. So obviously, Shamarki, I wanted to ask you,
Hmm.
what I like to sort of also ask the guests is what their first exposure was to reading as a child, if you were really into books.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's actually that's an interesting question to ask me because usually I wouldn't consider myself a big reader. It
Yeah,
kind of happened by accident, I would
yeah,
say, because when I used to go to regular school, you
yeah,
would get told to you gotta read this amount of pages for the next day and so on, and for me it felt like I was forced to read, right?
yeah,
So it wasn't until I have a degree in web development, and afterwards I get interested in graphic design, and as I was exposed to the future with Christo on YouTube, and he would recommend books for creatives, and I was
yeah,
like, all right, maybe I should start reading stuff,
yeah,
to learn something, and that's when I bought like my two first book out of my own free will, right? And that was about
yeah,
graphic design.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it was actually is only when I'm interested in certain subjects and what excites me, then I'm like thinking, all right, I should buy a book about this subject, right?
Yeah.
And it could be regards to religion. It could be also in the creative space.
Yeah.
So for it had like, I think my first book that I bought, it was actually like in religion,
Yeah.
in Islam back in 2000 and I think 14.
Yeah.
And when it comes to graphic design, it was I think around 2017 I bought my first book.
Okay. Yeah.
uh, so only when I'm interested in stuff like will I buy a book to read it.
About it.
Not
Do you remember the name of the first one? The
yeah
the graphic design one?
yeah, it was written by a guy named Aaron Draplin, a graphic designer, and the
Yeah.
title is pretty much everything. So it's just about his personal life and
Yeah.
how he got to where he is at today.
Yeah.
That was the first book. It was actually two books, and the second book that I bought was just a book filled with logos. So that
Okay.
was it was not actually a book you could read. So
Yeah, we just
those
had
was
different
were
logo
two,
designs.
yeah, exactly, right, to learn from what has been there before.
Yeah.
So those were my two books in when it comes to graphic design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just figured out the naming conventions. I think I want to call you Inspyre Sharmarke, and you're just regular Sharmarke. There we go.
Okay.
The regular one.
But
So you're wrapping your head around it, yeah.
yeah, that's what I was doing while he was
Uh,
talking. No, I'm joking. I was listening. But Inspyre Sharmarke. Do you remember what was the first book that you read as an adult? Then, just to tag on to his last
Uh,
point.
it would be
'Cause
The Great Gatsby.
I'm gonna have to agree on
Like
that one.
like as like, because obviously as Schumacher said,
Give him a bit of
um
background there.
oh
Wrote
okay,
over
no,
three
yeah, because I was
designs.
just going to say, because it's like, as a sort of similar to what Schumacher said, was as a child it was just like a lot of it was kind of forced on you in school and stuff like that, but the one that I actually went out of my way to like proper read was the Great Gatsby, which we also read as our first ever podcast episode. um and you know what it was with that one, it was just a lot of it was, it was written in a way that was just a lot was left for like interpretation of the guy. The actual story premise of it is a bit strange, to be fair, if you just look at it just for as a story sense. But all the stuff that comes with it, who he is, what he represents, all of that was like literally so many different things that you could, that I feel like it would just take me forever to get into. But for me, that was essentially the first one that I read as a adult. And then obviously once we kicked off this podcast, I told Mo about it, and then we had our first episode on that one.
Yeah, I don't think I'd read it again though.
You want to read it again?
Why is that?
It's
Yeah.
like I don't know. So I think what we discovered was like in that time period where that book was released was the authors were paid for the amount of like the word count that they had. Like they were paid for like a good story but with a lot of words. So
Ah,
he'll
Oh.
describe like this set of headphones, like it's black, it's shiny, it's glossy, but
uh,
the
That's
cover
very
still
harsh. I
is.
have to back my book. Yeah,
But yeah, for me,
the Great Gatsby was sensational. Wait.
it's a very long-winded writing style, but the story is interesting. But yeah,
I
man.
could imagine. I could imagine.
Yeah, back to the point at hand. So, what do you do then? So, and yeah, that's the interesting part. Your graphic design stuff, and
Mhm.
how do you end up there?
Again, back in the because I would say I had a non-traditional way to where I am at currently. I started as a web developer, and that's the education degree that I had to start with. And then I was introduced to Photoshop and Illustrator, and I was like, okay, that's fascinating. I like that. The graphic design world. So my love for development kind of slowly was fading out, as well as the graphic design was going up. So naturally, so in 2016, I took a another degree in multimedia design. So you learn about content creation, you learn about user experience design, and also some front end development. But actually, when I did that education, since from 2016 to 2022, 21, I had a small design business that I did as a part time,
Yeah.
where it was about design and branding. So I used that business to learn about it and just absorb everything from courses to videos to books and just take it all in. And it just developed from design to logo design to visual identity and then slowly
Yeah.
to branding and strategy. And that's how it came about, and just move slowly away from the web development world.
Yeah.
Even though
But
like I'm grateful because when you learn those skills, coding
yeah.
and programming, you can use that when you're building your own website. You don't have to ask people, hey, can you help me do the website, right? You can do both the development and the design as well.
Yeah.
So that's how I was introduced to graphic design through my education in web development.
Yeah. Okay. And I was just gonna say to just backtrack it a little bit. Was it always kind of a thing that you wanted to get into, web development and eventually graphic design?
No, it was also an accident, I would say again.
An
Everything that
accident.
happened,
Yeah.
uh, because what I thought when I went to primary school,
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say I had bad grades,
Yeah.
but I thought I wasn't capable of going to a high school here in Denmark. You had to
Yeah.
have certain grades to get into it, and I would always say like I was a creative kid back in the
Yeah.
days because I used to like draw and I loved manga and anime back
Yeah.
in the days and I still do to this day. So I
So
was
you always had
naturally
that creative like
yeah,
inclination.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But it was like when you for some reason when you go to primary school, right, they kind of subdue that part of
Yeah.
you, right? They don't encourage or cultivate the creative
Yeah.
side not until you become an adult and you take specific education for that, but
Yeah.
not in primary school. They want you to be a certain way.
Which is very
They want you to
academic.
very academic.
Yeah.
You have to raise your hands and have
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
this race for getting good grades, right? And I was it was not very motivating for me.
Yeah.
Like a big part of me is that if I don't know if I can't connect the subjects that I have to where I want to go at,
Yeah.
then I get easily
You
bored,
start losing interest.
demotivated. Exactly,
Yeah.
right? Losing interest, demotivated, and then I'm believed to like and when I'm like have these conversations with my teachers
Yeah.
alongside my parents, right? And they tell me, Shamaki, he just have to, raise his hands a bit more, right?
Yeah.
And which answers, I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, I will do that. And when I
Yeah.
did that, I will still get the same grades. I'm
Yeah.
like, what the hell do I have to do to change my grades, right? Uh,
Yeah.
that's
uh,
a that's
and
a great point.
That's right. And I was said like, uh, I hope they have changed that, right? About
Yeah.
have to
Probably
where they
not.
can cultivate a kid's creativity, and
Yeah.
I was and it made me think that I was stupid, right? And
Yeah.
I wasn't good enough for the grades, right? But
Yeah.
when I grew up and I took actually that this web development education, what
Yeah.
it helped me also it also grew my confidence in my own ability because
Yeah.
I had teachers who actually like were human beings who sat by you
Yeah.
and took their time to make you understand and learn about the stuff. And I learned much more than just coding. I learned like discipline and and project management and and timing and also like the ability to search for problems through the browser, the internet, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm stuck with a problem, how do I actually find a solution,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was saying on top of that as well, you were interested in what you were actually trying to learn, which is a big
Exactly.
difference.
hmm So when that happened, in that period of time, it was from 2013 to what was it, 15, right?
Yeah.
The education, uh, and when I actually knew, okay, this is what I want. I want to be in the creative space. Like it's like it took me some time to realize, because
Yeah.
actually when I wasn't doing design, I was doing poetry, right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's a thing I
Dabbled in
actually
the old
used to do.
poetry, eh?
Yeah, approach it like I even had a like a what would you call it, a state name, right?
Okay.
What was it?
What was the
The foreign the foreign traveler.
the
The
foreign
Foreign
travel?
Traveler.
Okay, that is a
Ooh.
very
Yeah,
poetic, abstract name.
it was
You,
extract,
you,
and
you weren't just a traveler, you were foreign.
a foreign one. And I actually used to do YouTube too, YouTube, and I had a like an Instagram account for that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to do actually what was it called, like poetry in Danish and in English,
Ah,
Okay.
love a
and
multilingual poet.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
What was it like? Proper
and I
spoken
was
word?
proper spoken word.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to have a the channel, the YouTube channel called Merciful Servant.
Okay.
Oh
Yeah, I
yeah,
was
Yeah.
yeah.
fortunate. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get one of my like videos on that.
Ah, that's
Oh
cool.
Uh,
damn, yeah.
yeah.
Damn, I know that's
So
that's that's a low key big. Back in the day, that was
Yeah,
everything,
that,
bro.
that's like you're like the Drake of spoken word.
It's
oh yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy,
they
right?
did they put the
It's,
in the back? Or did you not get that?
no, no,
Nah, okay.
no, no. I did my own.
You did your own.
I had a
Wow,
uh,
Damn,
multi-talented,
man.
yeah.
so at that time I learned about video editing
Yeah,
and animation and
Yeah.
camera and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I learned, if you needed something, right, help,
yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
you could just ask helping people because you have nothing to lose from it, right? So I used to ask Bona Mohammed, for example, even though he would take a long time to answer me, and Kamal Saleh too, the guy who did the meaning of life video.
The Australian guy.
Yeah, the
Oh
Australian
yeah,
guy,
yeah. Oh,
right?
these are some
I used
serious
to write them.
connects.
Yeah, I used to just write to them, "Hey, brother, I hope you're doing good.
Yeah,
The background sound that you use, where did you get it from?
yeah,
Or that
yeah,
clip,
yeah.
where did you get that from? Can you help me out, right?" And sometimes they would take about a month to
Yeah,
answer, But I
yeah,
was like, "All right, I got the time. I got nothing to lose. You don't answer me,
yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah,
There's no hard feelings." So there was always some aspect of creativeness in me, whatever it was through poetry or video
yeah,
editing or design, or I would even say strategy also,
mm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
The ability to use your creativity in whatever way or shape or form is something that has always been with me.
yeah,
But there was just a period of time in my life that it was just, I was oblivious. I was gone, probably because of, problems with school and personal stuff
yeah,
that was like hindering my mind to
Mm-hmm.
mm,
like actually focus and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So yeah.
With the when it comes to the whole creative aspect and stuff, and obviously you said that you was inspired by many things before the spoken word, the anime, the mangas. Is there anything recently that has been inspiring your latest works, or anything that you've seen recently that's made you go, okay, wow, this is good.
Yeah, like recently I've been much like what would you call it, inspired by how the body works, right?
Yeah,
I have shared like through like the internet online about like my condition, my
yeah. I was gonna
the
actually get onto that a bit later on, to be fair,
yeah.
because I
So
read the newsletter that you put out, which
yeah.
was really
So
good.
there's some about it. Thank
Yeah,
you. S- So that journey led me to study more about like the human body and
yeah,
what the human
yeah,
body is capable of, right? And I was actually like a guy named Wim Hof, right? The one
Oh,
they call
the
Iceman.
breathing guy. Yeah,
Yeah, the breathing guy.
yeah,
so so that actually inspired me to think like how our own body is capable of doing like amazing things, right?
yeah,
And how it actually affects how our
Yeah,
mental state, and it's just not something, hippie stuff, right? It's
yeah,
actually real, like
yeah,
physically, that can affect you mentally too. So that's what I have been inspired by recently, like
yeah,
be more conscious about, the body
yeah.
itself and the mind itself, right? So people like Wim Hof, for example, and another guy like David Goggins. I never know if you heard about that
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
The bald
Yeah,
guy.
he's
That super athletic
yeah,
guy. Yeah,
yeah, he's a
Yeah,
mental guy.
yeah.
Right? So those two guys were like, yeah, that's two of them. So,
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
So they inspire you in general. What about, do they inspire you creatively as well? Because one thing that I admire about you, I actually spoke to you recently about it, about it in terms of your graphic design skill.
I mean,
Obviously, you've developed that skill over time, and I don't like the word talent because there is, I think being creatively inclined is not a talent, is more like a blessing to me, because
yeah.
like people, like you said, people from a young age were blessed with that talent. Oh, I just used myself, but blessed with that inclination towards being creative.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm just being very careful with my words here because I want to be specific. And both of us, I would say, have that same kind of child. Like I don't know if Sharmarke's like when I was younger, I used to draw a lot as well when I was young. I used
Hmm.
to love picture books and art, and like my favorite topics in primary school, secondary school, ever, were to do with art, DT, all these things. Even though I loved PE as well, because I was just like a freak of nature when it came to like running and stuff. I
Yeah.
used to love running, but yeah, I was like the David Goggins of primary school, bro. But yeah, when I was like growing up, like I didn't have that nurture of my creativity. That's a topic that I often talk about on this podcast.
Hmm.
And one thing I admire about your skill in terms of vectorizing illustrations, like I think last year I remember you looking at random things on the streets, like road signs, like the top of the grates on the roads and stuff, and then you're making them into shapes and making them into kind of logo marks. I think that was really cool.
Thanks.
So yeah, is there anything that has been inspiring you creatively recently in that regard?
Oh, that's a good question. Because what I usually do, what I used to tell people, I say my creative process, like it's a mix between chaos and structure, right? So
Yeah.
I allow like lots of input from whatever I can get it from, right? It could be, as you mentioned, like from outside the street, from the manhole to the what you call it, like the street signs, to also when I studied like about the body and the mind, those things can also um like engage with my creativity, right? Because I'm being mindful about how I think and how I can actually use all those input I get from. But recently, actually, there was something that inspired me, but I haven't not used it to anything. I don't know how I can use it to, but it was the latest Spider-Man movie that has been around, across the
Oh, okay.
Spider-Verse,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
I
just
haven't watched it yet, so spoilers. Yeah.
okay, but the spoiler alert, but the art, the animation, right?
yeah.
It's just pure eye candy, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know like how they did it, but when I first watched it back in 2000, what was it, 18, or the first
Yeah.
one, Into
Something
the
like that.
Spider
Yeah.
Verse, yeah, it felt like it was something new, right? Something
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
haven't seen before,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Like
And
completely
it kind of
different
like,
animation.
yeah, and
That's what I even saw on the internet. Sorry to just cut you off there. A lot of people are basically
it's alright.
raving, saying that the new Spider Verse is like the main attraction as well is that it's changed the way that animation is done and how it looks and stuff like
Hmm.
that, which hasn't been
Yeah,
seen before. Yeah.
and it actually reminds me of there was also a Netflix series called Arcane, League of Legends, right? Arcane.
Yeah, I watched that too. It's a really good show.
Yeah, you're right. It has like that animation where you think like, wow,
Hmm.
right? And I'm like, if they have to produce that same quality for the next one, I will gladly wait like 3 4 years, whatever it takes. Just give me the
Yeah.
same quality. Uh, so I don't know how, in which way it had inspired me. It's just like I was just in awe,
Yeah,
amazed by their artistry, right? Like how much effort they put in, which made me think like when I'm creating something, I want to put as much effort into whatever I'm doing, design or writing, right?
mm,
So yeah, so those that has inspired me recently, this.
interesting. I've got another point that I was previously gonna talk about before I go ahead. Sharmarke Inspire was there something that you wanted to move on to, or can I raise that point real quick?
And now I was going to say, because you did touch up on it a little bit about when you was looking into the human body, and
Hmm.
obviously the newsletter that you brought out um, regarding how do you say, is it Cogan? Or is
Yeah,
it?
Cogan syndrome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to see if you touch up a bit more about it, because I think there was one passage in a newsletter that was actually pretty profound, to be fair, where you're talking about the unseen battle, the fact that it's not something that people can actually notice or see,
Hmm.
but it's something that you know yourself, and then having to have the mental strength and to be able to deal with it. And not only that, to understand that other people might be going through something as well that you can't really see.
Hmm.
um so now, yeah, I just wanted to know, just if you could basically go into that a bit more.
Hmm. All right. So, so what I have is a disease called an autoimmune disease called Cogan syndrome, and before I did not know what autoimmune was, and it's basically your own immune system attacking your own body,
Yeah,
right? And I didn't, and like for the life of me, never knew like your own immune system could do that to you,
yeah, yeah.
right? And specifically for Cogan syndrome, right? It attacks, like the most regular symptoms is the eyes,
Mm,
the inner ears, and also the balance organs that which is
yeah,
in the inner ears,
yeah,
as
yeah,
right. So like for me, it happened just suddenly back in December. Just
yeah,
I was getting dizzy day by day, and it was just get worse and worse, and uh, sometimes when you get a bit dizzy, you think like, all right, I can sleep a bit, and then I wake up and I feel fine again, right?
yeah,
But this was different. It was just getting worse and out of control. And the next day when I woke up, also like suddenly I couldn't hear in my right ear,
okay,
and also my eyes was hurting me, and I also remember when I was watching the final for the World Cup final.
yeah,
Even like I wear sunglasses just to be able to watch the final, right? Because
okay,
my eyes were so red
yeah,
and it was so painful. And I remember when I slept that night, I couldn't even sleep. I think I had about 2 or 3 hours about sleep because like I was always waking up again because of
yeah,
my left eye was hurting.
yeah,
So like from December till about I think February, I was doing various of tests and scans and to be able to diagnose Cogans, right? Because
yeah,
the thing about Cogans, you can't really say you have it until you have taken all options out. And we are talking about heart diseases, we're talking about, if you have tumors in your brain or, if you have any kind of other diseases, even
yeah,
HIV, they would
yeah,
like look at that, right? So I had like I think probably about minimum of 20 blood blood samples that was taking for
yeah,
me, and like I did various of tests with hearing, with my eyes and all that stuff. So it was through that they said, you don't have other
other
diseases,
stuff,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I don't have it. So it cannot be other than Cogan syndrome, right? And it perfectly aligns with, the symptoms that I have. And
yeah,
it is a very, like, I would say a difficult disease to have because, just imagine like you walk out of the street, right? And all
yeah,
of a suddenly you go to the right or you go to the left
yeah,
like a drunk person, right? But you're not drunk.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
also uh, uh, and it's hard for you to focus. And also the thing
yeah,
is that it actually in the long term it hurts your knees, right? Because you're putting a lot of weight on it just to stay
yeah.
balanced
Just to
with your
stay.
legs.
Yeah, yeah,
So uh, just to be stable, right? And the eyes is like, let's say, like last week, I had my symptoms came back with the eyes. So like for 2 days, I was in bed,
yeah.
couldn't do
Okay.
anything.
Yeah.
And on the third day, I could, slowly getting back up again. And on the fourth day, alhamdulillah, I was, back to normal. But but
Yeah.
that's also because like I'm on the medication right now, and and I'm like tapping out of it, and
Yeah.
that's probably also why the symptoms are coming back, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
those that medication is also like a really like I would say evil to some degree,
Evil. Yeah.
because it
What is
gives you
it like? Proper
it
heavy.
gives you yeah, it's heavy. It's like a heavy dose. That like they started
Yeah.
with a heavy dose with me, right?
Yeah.
About 70 milligram.
Yeah.
It's a heavy dose, and it gives you a lot of what do you call it? What's the word? Like I don't remember the word. Um, like the English word. I've totally forgot it. What was it?
Drow-
That's
drowsiness or
uh, the word I was looking for was, let me look up what it is. Side effects.
okay,
Yes,
side
side
side.
effects.
effects.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly what you said. Well, what did you say, Mohammed?
Drowsiness,
Yeah,
drowsiness.
drowsiness, tiredness, fatigue. It also actually also like changes the form of my face. It's called moon face.
Mm-hmm.
Your
Mm.
face swells up,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
and also mood swings,
Yeah.
and it actually also thins out your bones.
Oh.
So you have to have
Uh,
like a vitamin for that, calcium,
Mm-hmm.
right?
yeah.
For it.
Calcium. Yeah.
So I have been on that medication since I think the end of January up until now, and
Yeah.
next week I will have my checkup.
Mm.
Yeah,
Inshallah khair.
inshallah.
Inshallah.
How has that affected your work then?
In the beginning, like I think for a whole 2 months, I think I couldn't do any work, because of my eyes,
Mm-hmm.
mostly, right? So it was not until I got better in February that I slowly could, get up back on computer and do some work.
Yeah.
But in terms of, you know, but that's only when it's by myself. I haven't really tried to see how it would be to actually do work with like a whole room of people,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because that it actually would annoy me, or it
Yeah.
would because of my hearing.
Yeah.
Mm.
If if I
Sensory
was
overload.
yeah, if I was in a restaurant with you guys and we were eating, and there was a bunch of people around us talking,
Let's
I
talk.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
able I wouldn't be able to hear you that clearly. I have to
Yeah.
use a lot of, mental energy just to be able to
Yeah.
hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in like in large social gatherings, it's challenging, and also with my balance, I haven't been able to drive ever since December,
Oh.
uh, and and with my eyes, it looks like every second week that it gets back with the symptoms. But I don't know, if that's correct for now. But
Yeah.
that's what I have been observing so far. But yeah, so that's how it is. Like, so now it's just because that disease is so rare.
Yeah.
They don't even have. They can't even be certain about, will I ever be able to go back to being normal again, right? As I used to be before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say, like, we don't know. All we know is you have this medication and you have this plan you're following, and
Yeah.
we will, watch you
Monitor
progress
it.
over time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Monitor how you are doing over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically how it is,
You can do it, brother. We're rooting for you,
inshallah.
man.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Like
And
the thing
that's
that
a shot.
actually works, like being optimistic about it, right, is
Yeah.
crucial.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
all I as because everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah,
And alhamdulillah, I would say, it brought something good with it too, right? I became more conscious of my body and how I
yeah,
treat it, and also, my mind, and I could,
yeah,
it was that reason how I even, search for Wim Hof and, his methods, and
yeah,
and take time off the screens and the
yeah,
projects and everything else, and just focus on myself.
yeah.
So that's actually been good, alhamdulillah. I would say that, um,
Yeah, of
to
course,
take
alhamdulillah. I mean,
things slowly.
yeah, and that's of course that's always what it is as well, especially with challenges. It always, finds a way for us to. We always find a way to use different means, different methods to try and overcome certain
Hmm.
boundaries and certain things, and like even as you were saying, to be optimistic. I saw your tweet which said the best way to describe who I am at my core is an optimist and creative who lives to inspire people. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, that it's amazing to obviously hear in terms of all that, because it's like, mashallah, is the way you look at it is this has happened, of course, but it hasn't changed you as a person. It just changed how
Hmm.
you maybe go about things, and
Hmm.
how it is. And even the statement, I would say, back to being normal. I mean, it's a case of you are still who you are, but just having to do things a bit differently.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly. And
mentally, that's all we are really. We're just a shell, but mentally, that's what makes us different. You know.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
even in
Hmm.
your newsletter, it was more uplifting than it was about obviously you saying this is what's happened to me, which is amazing for me to
Yeah.
even read. You know.
Yeah. It is, and the reason why I am so calm, obviously, like, I had like frustrating moments, right? Because it is
Yeah.
a difficult thing,
No, of course,
especially
and
when
it's different.
right? Yeah, it's different, and
Yeah.
especially when I did not know what kind of, disease it was, right?
Yeah.
So like I would say, like I had like a mini depression episode, right? It was
Yeah.
like I was so down, and the next day I said to myself, Shamaki, you can, it's okay to feel this way, but you cannot allow yourself to go too deep into it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it wouldn't change your situation, right? You wouldn't
Yeah.
go back to your normal self, in that sense, like you could
Yeah. Yeah. How
walk
you were.
properly. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But having that, understanding of who you are,
Mm.
despite whatever happens to you, helped me, a lot with,
Yeah.
coming over that. And that would happen even if I, change whatever career or whatever I do. It would always be the same thing as I described
Yeah.
in my tweet, right?
Yeah.
And that took like years of practice, and like discovery and reflecting,
Yeah.
and
Of course.
and also from friends, right, who
Yeah.
like I speak to about them, like, why are we friends, right? That's actually a like a funny exercise, that where you can like uh, get to know who you are, right, more, like who you
Okay.
actually are. And
Mhm.
it was from, Simon Sinek, who,
Yeah.
who talked about, like, how can you, that's a funny exercise you could do to find your why, eh? And he said you can do this with a best friend, right? But not a family member or a spouse, because those relationship are too close, he would say, right?
Yeah.
But a friend, like, who will be there for you, and who you can call, and he will be there for you, right? And basically the question you would ask them is like, why are we friends?
Yeah.
And they will be look at you. I don't know. They would come with something
Yeah.
generic. You make me laugh. You funny. But then you play the
Yeah.
devil advocate, and you would say like, what is it specially about me that, like that you will be there no matter what, right? And you
Yeah.
like keep pushing and pushing and pushing, right? Until they start to describe themselves. And I actually did that twice, and it is true. They begin to describe themselves,
Okay.
and what they are describing actually is the value that you give to them in their life, right? And that
Yeah.
gives you like the ballpark of, your why, right? And
Mm.
essentially your why is not something you invent. It's not something new. It's something that's
Yeah.
always been there. It's just something you uncover, right? So the why essentially is the value that you bring to the world, and that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
About who you are is like your origin story is where you come from. So
Yeah.
that's what a why is.
What makes you
Yeah,
you?
yeah. What makes you you, right?
Yeah.
And that's like it doesn't matter if it's like if you're a son or a father or a creative or
Yeah.
like it is who you are wherever you are,
Yeah.
both professionally and personally.
Yeah.
That essentially what a why encapsulates.
That's a great point.
Is that,
Mm.
yeah, we're gonna have to do that exercise as well,
Oh shit.
Shamak. Um,
It is a fun exercise, I would say. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it live on the podcast, but yeah, I mean, it's good tangent. So you started speaking about Simon Sinek and why, and
mm,
yeah, so the book we read for this episode, for this podcast episode, Start with Why by Simon Sinek.
mm.
So you recommended the book, we read it, and here we are. So, Shamaki, do you want me to handle how we review this, or
Is
No,
it
no, you
Sharmarke
go for it. Go
Inspire
for it.
or the
Yeah,
regular?
yeah. I was
uh,
confused for a sec.
you're not regular Shamaki anymore, my super Shamaki. You've been promoted.
No,
Okay,
no,
cool.
yeah, go for
So
it.
yeah, so all right, mute the police sirens, man. There's always one guy, his area.
Yeah.
We always make fun of his area because the police are regular
I
visitors.
just put the
That's all I'll
sound
say.
effects for a bit of ambience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're regular podcast guests as well. But yeah, so Simon Sinek, Start with Why. I was making fun of it a little bit with Shimoki because I was saying he should have called it the Apple fanboy book. I don't know what, but
I saw
yeah,
your tweet. Yeah.
personally, I really enjoyed the book, especially at this time in my life.
Hmm.
I think even as Muslims, like one of the core tenets of Islam is doing things with intentions,
Exactly.
and I feel like personally, I read the book at a time in my life where I had really kind of lost track of my intentions and why I was doing things for the reasons I was doing them for. So yeah, overall for me, before we get into the nitty gritty and detail, like I really enjoyed the book and it really resonated with me. So I was glad that you recommended it. But what are your thoughts and why did you recommend it? Listen, I want to hear about it from you.
For me,
Mhm.
um, I I remember back in 2000 or was it 19? I was uh, I was an intern at a brand design agency in Denmark, and there was a one day that I was looking around their folders and looking how they are doing strategy, because at that time I was very interested in strategy. And then I was like looking at one file, and then I noticed that there was this golden circle, right? Why, how, and what. And I was like, who is this Simon Sinek, and what is this golden circle? Then I asked my design director about it, and he said like, well, this is made by Simon Sinek. And then he told me about it, and then I was like, then he told me like he made a TED Talk video about it. And I was like, okay, interesting. Then I went back to my seat, and then I just Googled him, Simon Sinek, on YouTube, and then I watched his TED Talk, and like it really like resonated with me, that video. It was not much about, the Apple aspect of it, but it was more about, the intention of it, like how, like how all great leaders uh, communicate the exact same way, right? By why they believe this is to be true, right? Because it reminded me about the prophet, like when he spread the message, right? He talked actually for like a wide standpoint of view, like what he believed, right? His cause, his purpose, and and first later on it became more about how do we actually do it. You have to perform salah, do zakat, hajj, and etc., etc., right? So so that's from that point on, right? From 2019, I watched that TED Talk, and then it was not until about 2021 that I actually, because I was doing all this work, but I was like, but what is the intention behind the work that I'm actually doing, right? What what is the result that I want to get out of this, right? So I used my friends, my especially my business partner at that time, to like really talk deep about this stuff, behind why am I doing this stuff, because he knows me, right? And it was about, then I did actually the why discovery myself, and the whole discovery is about you bring a collection of stories in your life that is specific, that resonates with you, that is meaningful to you, right? And what the other partner has to do is actually just to listen and
Mhm.
to be able to find patterns of behavior that comes more than one time. Because what ends up happening that you find these patterns, and through these patterns you find your why, right? That's how you actually uncover them. And what we found out about my stories is actually, when I look back at many of my conversations with different people, is that I use the word inspiration a lot, and I did use that before I even knew, you know, what it was, right?
Mhm.
And like the biggest compliment I could get from people is like, you inspired me, or you are such an inspiration for me, right? Like that actually, that's the intention of whatever work that I'm doing, right? It is to inspire people. And when I first started my business back in 2016, it was called Creativation. It was a bad name when I think about it now, but it was a combination of creativity and inspiration. Those two components, although like essential to my work, right? And I wrote about it in my website, and when I talk about to people, like I believe that, with inspiration and creativity, that we are enable us to explore possibilities, right? It's like when you get this aha moment, right? Some opportunities that you couldn't see before. It's like when you have experienced a what we would call it,
Ep-
like a meaning,
Epiphany.
yeah, like an epiphany from an article you have read, or a
Mhm.
course that you have been through, or a talk that inspired you, right?
Mhm.
It kind of opened your mind up for new thoughts, new possibility that you'd never thought about, right? And that's how I kind of view it too as well. And so that's sort of how I was introduced to Simon Sinek from that point. And I actually just, the thing about me is, when I'm interested in a person, right? I go like really deep. Like I try to find as many articles I can, as many sources I can, to really understand their thinking and their background. And
Mhm.
for example, Simon Sinek, for me, he is also like, even though he's very inspirational, he's also a very misunderstood guy. Because especially in Denmark, there has been like this discussion about, people don't buy what you do, right? And they also talk about, like, what about the other parts, the how and the what about those, right? And but when you really listen to what he says, right, he's actually says that he don't think that the why is more important than the how and the what. What he says is that they are equally important, right? Because when you don't have one of them aligned, you are kind of like out of balance. It's like people say, like, we don't know who you are anymore, right? That's you out of balance. So
Mhm.
so when you're clear on why you do what you do, and you have discipline on how you do it, your values, your guiding principles, and what you do and what you say is a tangible proof of why you do it and how you do it, right?
Mhm.
and and um, and the thing is also that the reason why he brings the why so much is because no one talks about it,
Yeah.
especially back in the early days, at 2009. Nobody talked about purpose, right? It was like heebie-jeebie stuff, as he would describe it.
Yeah.
So that's why he talks about it so much. And
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you talked about diving deeper into him because I feel like in this particular book he barely talked about himself at all. Like
Mhm.
um, he really did focus on the why, what he was talking about, the case studies that he brought up, like the successful business stories, like Apple in particular. That obviously he
Mhm.
really appreciates Apple as a brand, as a company. And then he talks about other companies like AOL. I didn't even know it was America Online. I didn't know that's what it stood for, but it's interesting. Like AOL
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah.
and other similar brands. Every time I hear AOL, it reminds me of the dial-up tunes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
what
Exactly.
that's
literally.
the main
Uh,
connection.
yeah.
Um, that's what I hear. But yeah,
Old Rusty.
um, but yeah, in the book itself, just to summarize it, because normally we summarize it and then we go into it, but
Oh
uh,
yeah.
I'm a bit rusty today. But yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, he talks about all these success stories, all these business use cases of all these different CEOs who started with why,
Mhm.
and then built onto that after, and how they were successful, and then even how those companies in particular even fell off a bit when those CEOs had left or they had lost their why, and then when they did return or when they rediscovered their why, how they started building up again. But I feel like he didn't actually talk about himself much at all, to be honest. So give us a bit more insight about the man himself and Simon Sinek. Who is he and what does he do, and why do we why do we value his words at all?
All right. Simon Sinek, as he described himself, he calls himself an optimist too, right? That's like who he is at his core, an optimist. And he has a vision, right? A vision the vast that he imagines a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every day inspired, feel safe wherever they are, and fulfilled by the work that they do. So that's like the vision of a world that do not exist yet, but that's the vision that he's committing himself to, and he brings in ideas, and he read books, and now he writes books and have these talks and podcasts and so on to advance that vision, right? And it doesn't matter whatever shape or form it takes, as long as it can advance that vision. And from himself, his own personal life, as much as I know, is he's actually British. That I found out recently, but you can't. It's very subtle, his accent. You can't hear it that clearly, but there are some times where you
Hmm.
can hear it, right? But because he moved a lot in his during his childhood, but
Interesting, because I didn't hear him talk about any British companies either.
uh, no, because most of his life is in the U.S.
Okay, okay.
But the whole golden circle is actually born out his own pain from he fell out. He lost his passion for his work. Basically, he owned a marketing consultant where he did work from yeah, I don't some companies, but I don't know anyone specifically, but that's what he said. And he even said he had amazing client, like good work, and but he didn't want to do the same thing the next morning, right? He literally fell out of love with his own work, and he actually was embarrassed by it, because superficially everything was good for him, like you couldn't complain, but he felt he couldn't. So he was just pretending he was okay, and people just said to him, like, do what you love, and he would say, yeah, I do it, but I don't feel like I love it anymore. And like fast forward, he would meet a friend who would actually say, are you all right, right? And he was actually like opening up and talked about his problem. And then said to himself that instead of just hiding, and he would search for a solution. And he already was building on this idea, the golden circle, but it was much about why do some marketing works and why do some marketing not work, right? And it was then he built upon this idea, and with a neuroscientist, where he tried to see how it correlates with how the brain works in decision making, and found out that we all communicate on these three levels: why we do what we do, how we do it, and what we do. So that's actually how it
Yeah.
came about. It was much more than just marketing. It was more
Hmm.
human. So
Hmm.
that's actually, so start with why is born out of basically his own pain for how he lost his passion for his work, right?
Hmm.
And his,
Interesting.
yeah, and his own why is to inspire people to do things that inspire them, so that
Yeah.
each of us can change our world. So
Yeah.
that's why he do what he does, right?
Great summary. Because yeah, he touches up on a lot of concepts around, like you said, human psychology,
Yeah.
and around. I mean, we like I think nowadays it is quite well known that a lot of these huge companies like Facebook spend like literally millions to billions. I don't know, in just human psychology, his
Mm,
research, making sure that we stay on their apps and making sure that we keep on spending all day on scrolling and consuming their content and paying their wages, of course. But yeah, so he touches up on a lot of concepts such as manipulation in marketing,
mm,
fear.
mhm,
So like different tactics that companies use that try and bring in more customers, but sometimes can show their lack of integrity, or sometimes can show that they do have a lot of good moral standing as well.
mhm,
So I thought that was really interesting because oftentimes when you do business with companies where they're always maybe shoving things down your face. Oh, this is a one-time deal. If you miss this, you're gonna die. Like all these different, like really
yeah,
aggressive marketing tactics. You
yeah,
don't feel good after, even if you do buy whatever they're selling. You don't feel good after buying it or consuming it. You're just like, ah. And you walk out. Even when you're like, let's say you're in those markets in Morocco or something. This guy comes and says, "For you, brother, for you, I've got this deal for you." Like you almost feel like you're forced to buy it, and then you
uh,
walk away
yeah,
feeling really like slimy,
yeah,
and then
God
maybe
damn.
you didn't make the deal, and
mhm,
then the guy gets angry at you for wasting his time. Like you don't feel good in either way. But then there's other times where you go somewhere else and the marketing style is different, and
mhm.
they're very warm and welcoming, and then you feel good about it. Even if you don't buy it, you feel good about it. Like the interaction you just had. Or when you do buy it, you feel good about your product, and you go
I
home
think
and you wear it
that's
proudly.
what I think he was
Mhm.
saying. He
So
was
I feel like
saying
a lot
that
of those concepts that you touched
manipulation.
on.
Oh no, so I was just saying the sort of what you were saying, that the manipulation
Hmm.
doesn't give you loyalty.
Mhm.
After you
Yeah,
you feel like you'd be going back.
your audio is breaking up quite a bit,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah. I was gonna ask Shamaki what his next point was, but no, I don't think I want to. I think I'm gonna go back to Shamaki H. But yeah. So like also about finding the symbol in your brand as well. I think that's very important. Like all these different like really big companies, like you mentioned, in Apple,
Uh-huh.
Nike. Their logos are very like world renowned. Like sometimes you'll even find the Apple and the Nike logo on the same set
Mhm.
of slippers. You go to like Somalia.
Yeah,
That's what I
yeah,
saw last year. I saw Adidas,
yeah.
Nike, and Apple all on one set of slippers.
Mhm.
So I was like, damn, the
Mhm.
symbol really is huge, you know?
Mhm. And there's also actually two interesting things about, companies like Apple and Nike, right? Because when that you can when Phil Knight used to be there and Steve Jobs used to be in Apple, you know, you could really tell like that the why was present, right? Actually, Simon Sinek he shared one time about Nike, where like there was a conference of people in company, and you had to present your company, and it was Phil Knight's turn, and he would say like who runs like one times a week, right? And everybody stood up, right? And then he would say, who runs like, I think he said 2 3 times a week, and then some people would sit down, and then he said, who in here runs like despite the weather, like is it raining, snowing, cold, and you just have to go out in the cold morning, and maybe just handful of people was there, and then he said, we are there for you, like when you are running out there in the cold weather, and the one who's championing you, you know, is us, right? The whole, just do it becomes apparent, right? And
Hmm.
it's actually interesting when you look back at the history of Phil Knight. He was actually a runner himself,
Yeah.
and his personality was like imbued into Nike. And the same goes for Steve Jobs as well. Um, uh, Like when Simon used to say like the why of Apple is to challenge, the big brothers, the status quo, is actually true, because Steve Jobs himself, when you look back at his life, he was a rebellious kid. Like, he didn't do well in school, he didn't have any friends, and he was like an awkward kid, basically. And he didn't even graduate college. He didn't want to go to college. He only took, calligraphy classes. And he even said that if I didn't take the calligraphy class, we wouldn't have, the font or the typeface that's used in the Macintosh back in the days,
Hmm.
right? If he didn't go to those classes, right? So it's true, because it was in Steve Jobs' nature to challenge, the authorities. So actually, when
Hmm.
you think about it, iPhone challenged the phone industry,
Hmm.
and what was it, the mobile industry, right? And the iTunes challenged the music industry. So it's actually like always like rebel. Like, they
Hmm.
even have, instead of, have they even made their own chip, right? The
Hmm.
M2, I think it is, chip, instead of using Intel's chip,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, we don't want you, we want our own stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
that, like now with the VR uh,
Yeah. Which
thing,
is crazy.
because
Yeah.
it's just in Apple's nature to be like that, right?
Hmm.
And this just do it and trying things, it is
Hmm.
in Nike's, and it comes from those people who founded the companies.
Yeah.
And that's how, actually, like, you can sense what kind of why, the intention behind
Yeah.
the company. And what I love about it, because when I learn about the why and and all of that concept, you can always bring it back to, the dean,
Hmm.
the religion, right? And how the prophet himself, he preached, and how he was, right? Because he was a leader, and to be a leader, you have to have followers
Yeah.
who believe in your cause, right? And the prophet was actually like a perfect example of, leadership, and this, and how you can drive with a cause that's like greater than yourself. So that was actually like how I used to just connect things, right? About,
Hmm.
because as you mentioned, Mohammed, before, like, our deen is also about like intention with our action, right? So
Hmm.
that's the thing I was missing, for my work, was like, what is my intention? You
Yeah.
can go day by day, but what is actually the underlying thing behind your work? What do you want to
Hmm.
achieve? Do you want to engage with people? Do you want to motivate people? Do you want people to feel something, right? What is it?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
yeah.
Spot on. So yeah, like touching on to Apple as well. Like I think Shamaki, you made some points in your notes around like even the unboxing experience itself.
Mm.
I'll let Shamaki Inspire. I'll let you talk on that a bit.
Yeah, no, like I was saying with the whole Apple thing, it's like with Apple, it feels like more than, because obviously I was reading in the book as well where they say like Apple felt like a cult, and it's kind of a strange thing where it's like, despite, I think it was MKBHD that was recently talking about his iPads and this other new sort of like notebook kind of thing that came out, which was a very good product. But he said, despite all of that, it's not really an iPad, and people just don't want to, gravitate towards something like that. And I think it starts from like the very beginning, which is when you first look at a product, that you're like your first impressions. And there is always that thing about Apple that feels very sleek and very like cool and like modern, and the whole experience that you get from like when I got my MacBook and then like sliding up the box, and it's like so perfectly well placed with the box underneath, and then in the middle of all of that is the MacBook sitting there in like this like enclave of this perfect like rectangle, and you like lift that up and then it feels like you've just gone through something,
Hmm.
like that moment in itself is just in itself another reason to buy another Apple product, just to just to
Hmm.
have that experience again. Once you put that laptop back in the box, it doesn't feel the same when you're taking off the seal and
Hmm.
cutting through it, all of that.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. That's for me. I think Apple is a great, like, the case study for him to have in this thing because
Mhm.
of how many things that they do to cultivate this like cult like following of
Mhm.
I could get something better somewhere else, but it isn't quite Apple. And it's the fact that I think like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that I'm like, how did they do that to my whole mental?
At what stage in your life?
Yeah, when did
Yeah,
they
yeah.
download this to me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing, and like there's like two interesting cases, right? Like, when have you ever seen, like when you were at the airport or like a cafe, have you
Mm.
ever seen people with a Windows, or
Nah,
like it's rare.
yeah,
Well, the other day I was at the
They keep them in the
or
suitcases.
or
Yeah.
even
I
in
was in
cafes.
the
I got work to do, but I ain't taking it out here.
like I was in the bus recently,
Yeah,
right? And there
Yeah.
was a woman who went inside, and I could see like she had her MacBook like
yeah,
open, and I could see it. And when I'm in cafe, I can see a MacBook. Like if it's
yeah.
like between Windows and Mac, I see a
Mm.
Mac.
Of
And
course,
also
man.
it's the same with an airport. And for myself, like I'm a like I have a Windows, right? And for the life of me, I couldn't imagine myself buying a MacBook, right? But I cannot deny, the influence that Apple has. Like even my own sister, which is the
Oh,
second
wait,
case.
wait. You don't have a Mac?
No, I don't have a Mac. I don't have anything that's Apple
Oh,
related.
even
It's
like the
back to being
phone.
regular Sharmarke now.
Yeah,
Even the phone
uh,
is Android.
yeah, it's a Samsung.
Goodness gracious me! This is how
Smart
it
man.
starts. I used to be like you. You know, I used to have all the Samsungs, Samsung, everything.
No,
I
what?
And
tell you
once
what.
you once you go through that package, when you get that iPhone and it's in that box, and you rip
Mhm.
open the seal and you go like this, and it slides
I
up, and you see
remember
the
that.
phone there, you'll never go back.
Actually, my
And
first
then you
smartphone
rip the
was an
seal off
iPhone.
the front. Oh, that little.
That- I can't deny that. Actually, like my first smartphone was an iPhone. It was an
Yeah.
iPhone. But the reason why I have a Windows is because like I game. So with
Okay.
a MacBook, I can't. It doesn't have like that horsepower to manage that, right? That's And also the price tag is too expensive for me. And I
Yeah.
also like to have accessibility, or I could extend my phone more than what it can, because Apple is a lock system, right?
Yeah,
It's like a lock
it's a bit
ecosystem.
limited, but
It's a limited.
sometimes you don't. But it's just very user friendly.
It is user
You know.
friendly. Like it has a really nice design. Like I
Yeah.
cannot deny that.
One
uh
of one of the biggest gripes I have with Apple, I told Shamaki recently, was like when I used to have a Samsung, the gallery was actually very easy to organize. I think all Androids, because the gallery is directly linked to the file system within the phone itself,
mhm.
is very easy to organize. But because Apple's gallery system is connected to the cloud and the photos, it's very difficult to organize things into folders. And when you're creative, like always taking screenshots of things and for inspiration and stuff, I hate it. I absolutely hate it. It's like the bit, like it just piles up, and then every now and then I just back it up onto my computer to try and organize things, but then I never do. So I just hate it, man.
So
I don't know when they're gonna fix that.
that's the reason why you don't have one, is it?
I have one, but
Nah, he still
I'm
got
really
one.
thinking
Oh.
about
He
it.
still got it.
I'm still
Like
I really
I'm not gonna lie, is like the is also because of like the price tag.
yeah.
Instance, my little sister, right? She wanted a new phone, right? And I told her, what do you need your phone, right? I need, she would say to me like, I need, this amount of, space for it.
Yeah.
And because what you use your phone for is like you call, you write, and you use apps, right?
Yeah.
And you need this amount of space. I think about 64 gigabyte is enough, right? As a minimum these days. uh, and then I would say, hey, there's this phone for this price tag. You can buy it one time, and that's it. About
Mm,
2,000 Danish krone one time buy. It's just like, nope, I want
yeah.
the iPhone. I'm
You're
like,
damn right.
why do you want, and see, like, you don't have the money for it, and you have to pay for 2 years for it.
Yeah.
I think it was the iPhone 13, I think, and it cost about, I think, 4,000 or 6,000 Danish krone. I'm not sure, but and then we should say, oh, I want the iPhone. I don't want Samsung
Yeah,
or
garbage out of here.
whatever garbage, right? I'm like, I'm willing to
Absolutely.
pay 2 years. Like she's
Yeah,
willing to pay 2 years, like
that's
200
right.
krones every each month for an iPhone.
If I
And
was given a choice to, if I had the
uh,
last bit of money and it was between getting an iPhone or food, I
Uh,
would choose an iPhone just to experience
right.
that little taking it out the box and
that like
taking that thing off. I would be dead before it charges, but it would be a great experience.
Oh man.
Yeah,
oh
yeah,
my.
that's what it is. That's what Apple does. It's crack, man. Doing
This
something.
is why Sharmarke hates you. Yeah, this is why, like, you asked me why am I friends with Sharmarke. I don't know, man.
I have no idea, no
I
clue.
don't know.
And and that is like what's great about Apple. Like they have like done their marketing work over the years, like especially Steve Jobs. Actually Steve Jobs is just he's really good at presenting. When you hear his speech, he would use words as amazing and revolutionary, and these
Yeah,
big words to describe the things, right? And when he talks, he don't stutter, he don't say ooh. He actually
yeah,
pauses, and then he talks. And he actually, like, he did this when he came back. He did this he announcement where he said, actually, where he talked about why Apple does what it do, right? Their why, basically, essentially,
yeah,
right? And he actually described it. He said Apple need to go back to their core. And that was back in 1991 when when Apple actually fired him, and then they bought him back again.
Yeah, I only knew that before
That's
reading
the
this book.
funniest things
yeah.
ever. Like, and he actually said that he said, we believe that people with a passion can change the world for the better. And when
Hmm.
he showed them the commercial video, the Think Different campaign, like he showed people who actually changed the world, right? Muhammad Ali, Mahatma
Hmm.
Gandhi, Pablo Picasso, in some way, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And those kind of people are also rebellious in their nature
Yeah.
against
Yeah.
authority or the status quo. And like
Hmm.
that's how they see themselves, and that's how Steve Jobs' personality is like, and that's how
Hmm.
they market themselves over the years. And it was actually affordable at that time to buy a Mac, compared to IBM, right?
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
slowly through the years it became expensive, and
Nah,
now
yeah,
they
it's
can,
ridiculous.
it doesn't
Like they'll
even really
just
matter the price tag anymore.
yeah.
It doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. You still buy it.
No, that's the crazy
Yeah.
thing. Like they'll just slap 2,000 on it, and then it's like, okay, now you have to get, and
Yeah.
then people
Yeah.
will
And
still
guys
get.
will and guys will be fighting for that price.
Yeah,
They'll be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
there's a reason why it's
The
2,000.
reason
You don't know
why.
Samsung guy.
I wouldn't lie, man. If I had, if I had that amount of money, I would even buy it myself. I'm not gonna lie.
Mhm.
I would go full Mac, not
Yeah.
Apple. I
Yeah.
mean, full Apple, right?
It's, it's funny because I'd say I'm a mixture of the two. I got yeah. I'd say I like to combine both platforms, but I think there's a lot of good integration now as well. So I can do a lot of Mac stuff on my PC, but not a lot of PC stuff on my Mac. But it's fine. But anyways, I think we gotta wrap it up,
Yeah.
guys. It's getting a bit late. Um, this is the Inspire UK Paper Trails podcast, and I'd like you to give us an inspirational quote to wrap it up. Shmark H. Come
Oh,
on, you've been dropping them all day, man.
all day.
You've been dropping them all day,
Hey,
man.
why did you say it to me before?
I like to put people on the spot.
It's okay if I try to find one, because like I can't remember one on top of my head. Huh?
Nah,
Okay,
go for it.
sure,
There's
sure,
something that resonates with you.
sure. You think about that. What I got. I'll give you a few seconds, and then I'll just want to make another point. So I think this has been a really good episode. Simon Sinek, Start With Why. Very good book in my opinion. Give it, I would say, a 9 out of 10. What about you, Shmarky? Hey, Shmarky.
This was a very, very solid book. I think you can use it in any form. Really, it doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
anything. I'll give it a solid 9 out of 10 as well.
And also, like, for the record, there's also, because this book is really just about the concept of the why. There's also
Yeah.
the book Find Your Why, which actually like is the more practical one,
Right.
where you have like you can find your why individually or as a team, as a
Mm.
company, and and that's Simon Sinek with his former colleagues who wrote that book. So that's actually also a good book if you really want,
Mhm.
you know, the practical ones.
Yeah.
As regards to the quote, right, it's actually the one that I shared, you know, what was it, in
On Twitter.
my recent, not my recent one, that the end of the May newsletter is by Henry Ford, where he said like, whatever you think you can or can't, you're right,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And that's actually true when you think about it, because you know, oftentimes when you tell yourself you cannot do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, right? What ends up happening? You actually don't do it,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it's actually neurologically like ingrained in us.
Feedback loop.
And when you tell yourself, actually, I can't do this, or I'm gonna try do this, right? So that's actually like a quote that inspired me recently, right? Because
Mhm.
it reminds me what we tell ourselves, you know, our mind actually shapes our reality and our behavior.
Yeah.
And when I told myself like, I'm not gonna get better, I'm just gonna stay the same, you know, in regards to my condition, and I
Yeah.
actually felt bad and worse even.
Yeah.
And it was not until that I told myself, you know, I'm gonna try do something.
Yeah.
And that's when I try to find some kind of, you know, ideal solution to my condition.
Mhm.
And you know, so that's really an inspirational one.
Beautiful. I love it. Cool. So it's been great having you on. I think we definitely want to have you back on because we touched on Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. We haven't actually reviewed that on the podcast, and I'd been meaning to say that's one that we should review. So it'd be good if you could come back on for that one.
Oh, which book?
Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Oh, I actually had that on my, I think, my bucket list one time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get to reading it, and we'll keep you posted.
What about, you know, Austin Kleon? Because I know you also read the book by Austin Kleon.
Yeah, so we reviewed still like an artist, but yeah, I don't think we reviewed the other books.
Sure.
So I mean, there's a few books you can become a recurring guest if you want.
All right.
But yeah, man, it's been great having you on. I really appreciate it from the creative to creative, and yeah, anything you want to add on to Sharks?
I
You
had
guys said
to. I
Sharks.
think
Go
this
on.
was a incredible podcast. And definitely a
The
good
lights have gone
episode.
off.
Let's
Yeah, so yeah, man. Thanks for listening. This has been Paper Trails episode 5. And yeah, it's been your boys from Inspyre, joined by Sharmarke from Denmark. Hope you guys all have a great week and stay creative.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to the Paper Trails podcast. If you like this episode, please leave a review, comment, like, and subscribe. And be sure to follow us on all our socials.
Keep moving, keep growing, keep learning. See you at work.